Aladdin is an animated movie produced by Walt Disney Company in 1992. It was directed by John Musker and Ron Clements, two white American animators. This production was based on a story from 1001 Nights, a collection of Middle Eastern folk tales that were created during the Islamic Golden Age. In English, the title is known as the Arabian Nights. However, Aladdin was not originally in this collection. The story was added to the collection by a French translator, Antoine Galland, in the early 18th century. An interesting fact is that in the Arabian Nights, the story of Aladdin is about a poor young boy living in the streets of China. Therefore, he is portrayed as a native Chinese boy. Originally, the story of Aladdin took place in Western China. Aladdin is the first attempt of Disney making a production about a non-European culture. How did it go? Well, even though the money was highly successful money-wise and brought a lot of interest to the Walt Disney Company with Another Beautiful Princess, it was not the best cultural representation in Disney movies. As people, we tend to overlook some crucial aspects of the movies because we focus mostly on the entertainment. For Aladdin, it could be the funny genie, who is the only character in the production that does not rely on stereotypes. Looking back at Aladdin from the perspective of my childhood self, I remembered the flying carpet, the love story between Jasmine and Aladdin, and for some reason the castle. Coming back to it as a media student made me question every single thing I mentioned in the previous sentence. One of the most important concepts for Aladdin is Orientalism. To make this term more clear, I would like to quote Edward Said. Orientalism, therefore, is not an airy European fantasy about the Orient, but a created body of theory and practice in which for many nations there has been a considerable material investment. The big purpose of Orientalism is gaining profit by exploiting certain cultures, and this is exactly what we can notice in Aladdin. The culture depicted in the movie is not 100% Arabic, as there are some parts in the behavior of the characters, architecture, and the overall desert setting that do not match this culture. However, it cannot be any different as the voice cast for the movie was all white, as well as there were no Arabs involved in the making of the Aladdin. Edward Said also explained in his book Orientalism as a Western style for dominating, restructuring, and having authority over the Orient. Therefore, it is often said that Western representations of the Orient are based on stereotypes. In fact, Orientalism has originated in pop culture because of the superiority West felt over the East. It is very important because, as I said before, there were no people culturally linked to the Middle East in the making of the movie. Even if it was Disney's first non-European culture depiction, we cannot justify it. Having people that represent specific cultures when you're making movies about them is crucial. The first mistake Disney made when producing Aladdin in 1992 was the opening song. The original involved very racist lyrics that made the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee Act. Most people do not even realize that the lyrics have been changed throughout time. The original lyrics to the song were, "Where they cut off your ear, if they don't like your face, it's barbaric, but hey, it's home." It implied that the Arabic culture is very negative, aggressive, and simply bad. Disney tried to fix that by altering the lyrics too. "Where it's flat and immense, and the heat is intense, it's barbaric, but hey, it's home." The alterations of the lyrics did not satisfy the Arab Americans, as the word barbaric was left by Disney. And it is totally understandable why, as it still implies that the whole city of Agrabah in the movie should have negative connotations, not only for the audience, but also for the people who live there. Another important issue in the movie is the scene where Jasmine gives an apple to a poor boy on the market. The merchant's reaction, where he tries to cut off her hand for stealing, is an example of Islamic law. This scene is a great example of the stereotypes about Islamic religion, which is depicted as cruel. In Islamic law, it is said that if someone is stealing out of hunger or poverty, is not to be punished. Therefore, they would not cut off someone's hand for stealing food. The appearance is another part of the movie that is an example of Orientalism. The way in which the characters are portrayed is a form of caricature that continues throughout the movie. The main difference we can notice is when we compare the appearance of Jasmine and Aladdin, the good characters, with the appearance of Jafar, the villain. The looks of Aladdin are said to be inspired by Tom Cruise in Top Gun, and Jasmine's looks are also inspired by various American models and actors, as Roger Ebert wrote in his review. Most of the Arab characters have exaggerated facial characteristics, hooked noses, glowering brows, thick lips, but Aladdin and the princess look like white American teenagers. This is an example of ethnic stereotypes. Jafar's nose and eyebrows are more defined than Aladdin's, but Jafar is not the only character that has such facial features. During the opening song, we can see a merchant with a huge nose. After that, we can see the guards with big brows and cracked teeth. One can say that the secondary male characters are portrayed as less handsome than Aladdin. Another important fact about their appearance is their skin color. Jafar and secondary characters have darker complexions than Aladdin or the Sultan. The accent is another feature of the characters that makes them different from each other, even though they are all said to represent Arabic culture. The heavy Arabic accent is given to poor Arabic people on the streets, shopkeepers and villains like Jafar and other bad characters. At the same time, Jasmine, her father, Aladdin, and other good characters like the genie are given an American accent. It is a way of Western culture dominating in the movie and underlining that the characters that are connected to Western culture more are the true good ones. Jasmine is a character that also embodies a bunch of stereotypes about Arabic culture. For example, she is being forced into marriage and claims to be locked in the castle for her whole life. It is another part of Orientalism brought into the movie as it shows the oppression women have to face in the Middle East. The way Jasmine's father tells her that she needs a man to take care of her is an emphasis on Jasmine not being a progressive woman. Even though we see her rebel at the will of her father at first, she does find love at the end of the movie and agrees to marry Aladdin. Of course, it is as she wanted, a marriage out of love, but the Sultan has to change the law for it to happen. Her appearance is also very sexualized and inaccurate. The clothes that Jasmine is wearing are another Orientalist fantasy we can notice in the movie. It shows how Western pop culture views the woman from the Middle East as exotic and sensual. Jasmine, as a member of a royal family, should not be revealing when it comes to clothes. Historically, the only part of her clothes that is accurate are her pants. Women have worn a long one-piece dress over loose pants. Her belly definitely would not be as visible. The only accurate item of her outfit is the tiara, which is a symbol of power and was a common piece of classical dressing for a princess. Overall, Jasmine is one of the most sexualized princesses in Disney universum. In the scene where she is shown as Jafar's slave, she is shown in a red set, which is often perceived as the color of seduction. What is more, she uses her sexuality as a weapon to save Aladdin by kissing and seducing Jafar. This is another clear example of Orientalism in Aladdin, because in other Disney productions like Snow White, a princess is waiting for the prince to save her. Moreover, European princesses like Belle in Beauty and the Beast are portrayed as shy, whereas Jasmine is shown as very confident. Aladdin is situated in Agrabah, a fictional city described on Disney fandom site as bustling Arabian desert kingdom. This is an interesting aspect of the movie as the castle in which Jasmine and her father, the Sultan, live looks like Taj Mahal. The blend of cultures seen in the movie shows how the Middle East is treated more as a whole than individual cultures with their own autonomy. The Hindi architecture and elephant sculptures suggest that Aladdin could be inspired by Indian culture. As Stuart Hall states, there are two systems of representation. The first one, that allows us to give meaning to the world by constructing a conceptual map, and the other, that depends on constructing a set of correspondences between the conceptual map and set of signs and symbols. The set of signs and symbols that we can see in Aladdin are unclear because they represent various cultures from the Middle East. Therefore, the conceptual map of the culture that the movie creates is very invalid. The movie clearly shows the approach the West has on the Middle East. Not only can we see the male gaze through Jasmine's appearance, but also lack of respect towards Arabic culture through racist elements of the songs and the plot. The representation of the Arabic culture of the movie is based on a set of symbols from the Middle East and is highly inaccurate, not only from the historical point of view, but also by the clothes the characters are wearing, the architecture presented in the movie, and even the names used by Disney. Even though we have to remember it is the first Disney movie that introduced non-European culture, we cannot ignore the generalized depiction of the Middle Eastern cultures, tons of stereotypes, and even racism visible in the production. It all proves the lack of respect the production of the movie had towards the culture and leaves the audience with an impression that Aladdin may be one of the worst cultural representation Disney has ever produced, even if its narrative is considered to be one of the most beautiful Disney love stories. This podcast and music were written and directed by Martyna Krupińska, 2022.